What if an entire continent silently turned its back on you, without ever uttering the word no? That's exactly what appears to have happened to Meghan Markle. No press conference, no formal statement, no royal drama or official royal rejection. Just silence. A loud, awkward, career-altering silence. And behind that silence, a flurry of emails, snubbed reservations, panicked phone calls, and one CEO slip-up that confirmed what Meghan never wanted the world to know. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The Australian tour, once designed as her grand re-entry into global favor, has been quietly axed. And the reasons behind that stunning collapse? They go far deeper than bad PR or scheduling conflicts. It wasn't just hotels and restaurants saying no. It wasn't just the Australian press raising eyebrows. It was the people, the mood, the market. And according to leaked insider emails, it started long before Meghan ever made a call. But before we unpack all of that, let me ask you this. What does it mean when the world you once ruled no longer returns your calls? Why did Australia, a country that once rolled out the red carpet for Meghan and Harry in 2018, suddenly go cold? Why are top-tier resorts, event planners, and even PR firms now refusing to associate with the Sussex name? And how did this go from a $2 million planned spectacle to absolute cancellation? We're about to uncover the shocking behind-the-scenes spiral that led to this very moment. The private emails, the CEO's unguarded confirmation, and the final, brutal message that ended it all. But first, let's rewind. Let's remember the moment it all should have begun. Late 2024. Archewell's inner circle had a new obsession. They weren't just planning a tour. They were planning a comeback. A redemption arc. The Meghan 2.0 narrative. Meghan and Harry's team had been quietly planting seeds in media outlets. Whispers about renewed global work, humanitarian outreach, strategic partnerships. And at the center of this quiet rebranding, a proposed 2026 tour of Australia. Why Australia? Simple. It worked before. Back in 2018, when Meghan and Harry visited as newlyweds and working royals, the tour had been a roaring success. Tens of thousands gathered to cheer, newspapers beamed with admiration, and the monarchy looked, briefly, modern again. The baby bump reveal, the sparkling gowns, the rain-swept moment under an umbrella that became iconic. It was the high point. So why not go back? Privately, sources close to Archewell said Meghan saw Australia as a reset button, a stage big enough to reignite global admiration, but small enough to control. But there was a problem. The world had changed since 2018. So had she. You see, in Hollywood, there's an unspoken truth. You're only as good as your last headline. And for Meghan Markle, the headlines since 2018 had been mixed, at best. From the Oprah interview fallout to Netflix's struggles with Sussex content, to Spotify's very public breakup, there had been more whispers of overreach and disappointment than accolades. The public mood had shifted, and in places like Australia, where tall poppies are cut down quickly, the sentiment was even sharper. Still, Archewell pushed ahead. The tour was mapped out with military-level precision. Resort bookings were quietly explored. Event partners contacted. Coordinators briefed. But almost immediately, something strange happened. Venues weren't replying. PR firms declined politely. Tourism boards stalled. At first, Meghan's team assumed it was a fluke, or that someone had tipped off the press prematurely, or perhaps the royal family was interfering again. But soon, it became undeniable. No one wanted them. One hospitality executive reportedly told a colleague, "It's not that we hate them. It's just not worth the circus." Another leaked email put it more bluntly. "We don't want the drama or the backlash." For Meghan, who once imagined arriving like a queen, complete with media fanfare, exclusive dinners, and soft-focused Netflix footage, the silence was brutal. And inside Archewell, panic. They scrambled to repackage the itinerary. More charity, less glamour. More substance, less sparkle. It didn't help. Requests for bookings were declined, ignored, or met with polite deflections. And still, Meghan pushed forward. That's when the first real leak happened. And it didn't come from a disgruntled royal source or a British tabloid. It came from someone closer. An audio recording of the Archewell CEO, in a call with a production coordinator, casually confirmed what insiders had feared. The tour was off, not postponed, not reworked. Axed. We couldn't get the support we needed, he said, not realizing he was being recorded. It just didn't materialize the way we hoped. One sentence. That's all it took. It was never meant for public ears. But it spread like wildfire. And when Meghan heard about it, explosive, according to sources, she felt betrayed, exposed, humiliated, and worse, she now had to respond. Except what could she say? The story was now out. The tour was officially over. But the why behind it? That's the part no one could quite grasp. Until documents started leaking. Internal notes from Archewell. Rejected hotel agreements. Requests labeled too high maintenance. Emails from venue managers saying they were avoiding controversy. Controversy? From a charity tour? Or was that just code for reputation risk? Because that's the uncomfortable truth. It wasn't the itinerary that killed the tour. It wasn't the travel budget or security logistics. It was the optics. For many Australian venues, inviting Meghan and Harry meant inviting headlines, opinions, and an avalanche of polarized attention. And in a world still recovering from the Sussex media saga, that kind of spotlight wasn't seen as glamorous. It was seen as dangerous. One venue even reportedly received a petition from locals urging them not to host the couple. Let that sink in. And yet, through all of it, Meghan still believed it could be turned around. She called in favors, contacted former allies, considered reshaping the tour completely. But by then, it was too late. The wave had turned. The continent had spoken, not with protests, not with outrage, just polite refusals, closed doors, unreturned emails, and silence. But that wasn't the end of it. Because even after the tour was canceled, even after the internal chaos, even after the Archewell CEO's mistake, Meghan still had one move left. And when she played it, it changed everything. Because while Australia said no, someone else said yes. And the ripple effect of that single phone call would pull in royals, media giants, and even one very unexpected Hollywood power broker. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when the dream you've been quietly building for 2 years suddenly collapses? Not because of your enemies, but because your audience simply stops clapping. That was the terrifying realization creeping through the Montecito estate, like a cold draft Meghan Markle couldn't shut out. One moment, she was reviewing floral arrangements and video treatments for her Impact sessions in Melbourne. The next, the phone stopped ringing. And the silence that followed? It wasn't just inconvenient. It was humiliating. Back in late 2024, Meghan's plan to return to Australia was more than just a PR stunt. This was going to be her Phoenix moment. The tour had been floated quietly through Archewell's strategy meetings months earlier, masked as a philanthropic endeavor, eco-partnerships, women's empowerment seminars, Indigenous youth panels. But beneath all that, a much bigger goal, to resurrect the Meghan brand, not as a disgraced duchess or failed podcast host, but as a global force. She didn't just want attention. She wanted adulation. And where better to find it than Australia? A continent where, in 2018, thousands lined the streets to wave, where camera lenses seemed to adore her, where the British tabloids had, however briefly, referred to her as Diana 2.0. Australia was safe, familiar, proven. So they began building. According to sources, Archewell staffers were quietly instructed to revisit 2018 tour contacts. Old connections in Sydney and Melbourne were pinged for potential collaboration opportunities. Netflix producers were looped in for possible filming logistics. Outlines were drafted for panel discussions that would involve influencers, nonprofits, and carefully curated community partners. Meghan wanted it all, without the royal restrictions. No curtsying, no palace briefings, no protocol, just her moment. Behind closed doors, she reportedly described it as a Princess Diana meets Michelle Obama kind of event. Intimate yet grand, powerful yet personal, flawless but unfiltered. Every single moment, from her arrival on the tarmac to the closing peace meditation by the sea, was sketched out like a film storyboard. There would be speeches, there would be fashion, there would be headlines, and most importantly, there would be control. No royal family, no aides, no Buckingham interventions. This was Meghan's tour. Except, there was just one thing she couldn't script. The response. The first crack came in February 2025. An outreach email sent to a high-end eco lodge in Byron Bay received no reply. Odd. That same venue had rolled out the red carpet for the Sussexes in 2018. They'd even renamed a smoothie after Meghan. Now, silence. A follow-up went unanswered. Then a second resort declined, citing prior obligations. Another luxury venue said they were undergoing renovations that month, despite being fully booked online. A beachfront property in Queensland, when approached to host an intimate panel on climate change, responded simply, "Thank you for the inquiry. Unfortunately, we're not looking to host events of this nature at this time." It was happening again and again. Politely worded refusals, sudden disinterest, and in some cases, outright ghosting. At first, Meghan's team brushed it off. "We're just starting too early," said one advisor. "It's the holidays," said another. "They'll come around once they see the full proposal." So they pushed forward. They upgraded the pitch deck, added graphics, attached projected press coverage analytics, mentioned Netflix interest, though no formal deal was in place. Still nothing. Then came the leaked WhatsApp messages. A well-connected event coordinator in Sydney, who had previously helped organize parts of the 2018 tour, accidentally sent screenshots to the wrong thread. The messages quickly circulated through Australia's event planning scene. One message, reportedly referencing Meghan's team, read, "They think they're doing a royal tour. It's a commercial photo shoot in disguise." Another added, "I'd rather host a literal royal python. Less drama, more grateful." The comments sparked laughter, but also alarm. Because for the first time, Archewell's tour was being publicly perceived not as a goodwill mission, but as a vanity project. When the messages eventually reached Meghan, she was furious, not because of the tone, she'd heard worse, but because they were spreading. The mockery was contagious. Tourism boards began pulling back. Partners who had previously expressed interest grew unavailable. One brand even asked to have their earlier meeting scrubbed from all records, worried about online backlash from critics. This wasn't just a slow start. It was a reputational sinkhole, and Meghan knew it. Still, she pressed on. In early March 2025, she hosted a planning dinner at her Montecito home. Floral projections of eucalyptus leaves filled the walls. A didgeridoo playlist set the atmosphere. Staff wore name tags with Aboriginal-inspired designs, which, according to one consultant, made some guests very uncomfortable. This was her moment to rally the troops, to spin the narrative back into her control. She stood, glass in hand, and declared, "Australia was the place we fell in love with the world. It's where the world fell in love with us. And we are going to remind them why." Cheers erupted, but behind the clapping, eyes darted across the room, because one of the guests had received a troubling update before arriving. The largest conference venue in Sydney had declined their inquiry, again. This time, they weren't polite. They were clear. Their email read, "Unfortunately, after internal review, we believe this event poses too high a risk to our reputation and current partnerships." That email was shared with 3 other hotels, and by morning, 8 had passed. And yet, Archewell still kept pushing. Meghan reportedly refused to pull the plug. She believed the media narrative could be flipped, that all she needed was a powerful endorsement or a high-profile celebrity to anchor her message. Names were floated. Margot Robbie. She had ties to Harry. Nicole Kidman? Too risky. Chris Hemsworth? Maybe, if he wasn't filming. Ultimately, they tried to leverage former allies. Soho House, UN Women, even a contact at the Obama Foundation. But nobody wanted to touch it. Too political, too divisive, too messy. By May, Archewell had spent nearly $200,000 on preliminary logistics, PR materials, and planning expenses. And yet, there was no venue, no confirmed dates, no press strategy. Worse, Netflix had quietly backed away from the table. One executive reportedly told a staffer, "We're just not sure there's a story here." That same week, Spotify's former CEO gave a blistering podcast interview, indirectly referencing the Sussex brand as overproduced and under-delivering. The timing couldn't have been worse. And in Meghan's inner circle, stress turned to chaos. Some advisors began quietly suggesting that they pause the tour until 2027. Others feared the leak of internal documents showing just how few confirmations they had. One even floated the unthinkable. Maybe Australia doesn't want us back. That's when everything changed. Because just days later, Archewell CEO picked up a phone and said one sentence that would destroy everything they'd been building. But the true impact of that call hadn't hit yet, because Meghan had no idea what was coming next. And when she found out, the rage could be heard through the walls. How does an entire tour collapse in a single sentence? It wasn't leaked video. It wasn't a tabloid ambush. It wasn't even Meghan or Harry who broke it. It was a phone call, a quiet, 8-minute call. And by the end of it, one offhand comment from the Archewell CEO would do what no royal feud, no angry press headline, and no palace insider had managed to do. He confirmed it. He confirmed what Meghan had spent months denying, even to herself. The tour was off, scrapped, abandoned, not postponed, canceled. And the words that sealed the deal? We couldn't get the support we needed. It just didn't materialize. Let's rewind. The call was meant to be private. It was a routine check-in between Archewell's lead logistics consultant and a former Australian tour coordinator. The two had worked together loosely during the 2018 Royal Tour, and this was a follow-up to see if there was any last chance of securing venues or interest. On the line, Archewell's chief executive officer, a man handpicked by Meghan and Harry to professionalize their global operations, known for his calm demeanor and decades of nonprofit experience. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't reckless. But that day, he got too comfortable. The Australian contact had just returned from holiday and asked point-blank, "So where are things at with the tour? I heard it's being pushed." There was a pause, and then the words came out. Too casual. Too real. "Yeah. No, we're not doing it anymore. We couldn't get the support we needed. It just didn't materialize." A sigh followed. Some vague complaints about local resistance. And then a phrase that sealed the moment. It was ambitious, but maybe the appetite just isn't there anymore. Those words, they were recorded. Because unbeknownst to Archewell's CEO, the Australian consultant had recently switched phone systems. Their office had automatic transcription software for documentation. And that recording, not maliciously leaked, but quietly passed along in an email, became the bullet Meghan never saw coming. 3 days later, it surfaced, not in the media, but in a group chat. 5 event planners, 1 entertainment publicist, 2 local venue managers. They passed the call around like wildfire. Screenshots, quotes, a laughing emoji or 2. By the time it reached a Sydney-based gossip columnist, it was already too late. The email hit Archewell's press inbox on a Friday morning, subject line, "Urgent fact check, tour cancellation confirmation." Inside, a transcript of the CEO's words. No commentary, just the quote. And one question, "Can you confirm the above statement?" Panic exploded in the Archewell offices. Meghan was reportedly livid, not just because of the leak, but because no one had told her the tour was already being labeled dead in conversations outside the organization. Worse, the call wasn't even scheduled through official PR channels. It had been handled off-calendar, meaning there was no public affairs handler to clean up after it. Staff began combing through their internal systems. Who had called who? Was it recorded legally? Was this consultant under NDA? And while the legal team scrambled to draft a response, Meghan was pacing her Montecito garden, phone in hand, face pale with fury. One assistant later described the moment as the closest thing to a royal tantrum I've ever seen from her. She wasn't crying. She was furious, cold, focused, like something snapped. But the damage wasn't just internal. Because the minute the quote began making the rounds in Australian media circles, the tone of the story shifted. Before, the tour was rumored, speculative, a potential project. Now, it was a failure. And not just any failure, a confirmed failure by Meghan's own team. The media pounced. Tabloids ran headlines like, "Meghan's Down Under dreams officially over." Archewell tour axed amid global snubs. CEO confirms. Nobody wanted the Sussexes. Even broadsheet publications, usually more reserved, couldn't ignore the story. One publication wrote, "The quiet scrapping of the Sussexes' proposed Australian tour raises more questions than answers. Why the silence? Why the refusals? And most critically, why now?" Meanwhile, inside Archewell, the crisis deepened. The CEO issued a formal apology to Meghan. He insisted the quote was taken out of context, that he'd been venting off record, that he didn't know the call was recorded. But Meghan didn't care. Sources say she refused to speak to him for 3 days. She removed him from multiple planning threads. Public relations staff were instructed to handle all further communications regarding Australia without executive oversight. And privately, she wanted him gone. But firing him would cause headlines of its own. So for now, she let him twist in the wind. Harry, according to insiders, was quiet during this period. Uncharacteristically quiet. He was in the UK for a veterans event, and while Meghan raged, he was reportedly unreachable for several hours during the height of the scandal. When he finally responded, one text, short, terse, "We'll talk when I'm back." Even that rattled Meghan's team. Because if Harry wasn't panicking, was that because he expected this? Had he known the tour was doomed? Had he warned her? That question began swirling in Montecito. Some staff believed Harry had been skeptical about the tour from the beginning. Others suspected he wanted to repair things with the royal family and thought this tour would only deepen the rift. But whatever the truth, Meghan felt blindsided. And that's when the CEO's original transcript hit social media. Not from Archewell, from a disgruntled PR agency, one that had worked with the Sussexes briefly in early planning stages. They weren't under NDA. They weren't under contract anymore. But they did have connections in Australian event circles. And when they got the quote, they tweeted it. "We said it wouldn't work." Now here's Archewell CEO saying it himself. Attached, the quote. Hashtags followed. Hashtag Sussex Snub. Hashtag Meghan Down Under. Hashtag cancelled not postponed. And just like that, the story spiraled. TikTok creators dissected the tour collapse. YouTubers pulled up the itinerary plans. Twitter threads mocked the climate panels on beaches with VIP-only catering. Even Meghan's fanbase was conflicted. Some blamed racism. Others blamed PR failure. But many, shockingly, began questioning her decisions. One viral tweet read, "Why plan a royal-style tour when you've spent years telling us you're not royal anymore?" It got 1.2 million views. Meghan noticed. Behind the scenes, the damage was mounting. Sponsors pulled back from upcoming Archewell partnerships. A planned Netflix mini-doc on women in leadership, to be filmed during the tour, was quietly shelved. Worst of all, a major Australian charity Meghan had hoped to work with issued a public statement. It read, "We were approached by representatives for a high-profile North American initiative related to women's empowerment. After review, we declined participation. We wish them well in their future endeavors." No names. But everyone knew. And Meghan? She knew too. She knew the tour was over. But she wasn't going to admit it. Not yet. Not publicly. Because if the tour was dead, she needed to find someone to blame. And in the shadows of her Montecito estate, she knew exactly where to look. It wasn't just the CEO's fault. It wasn't just a leaky consultant or an opportunistic PR firm. No, this went deeper. Someone had been undermining her. Quietly. Subtly. And she was about to find out who. What happens when the glittering world of Hollywood collides with the crumbling crown of post-royalty? You get chaos. You get contradiction. You get rejection in velvet gloves. And for Meghan Markle, you get something even worse. Silence from the very industry she thought would never turn its back on her. Let's be clear. Meghan didn't just marry into royalty. She married into legacy marketing. She knew the game. She played it well. For a time, she even outshone the monarchy itself. But in early 2025, as her Australian tour plans unraveled behind the scenes, Meghan turned to the one force that had always propped her up when the palace wouldn't. Hollywood. Except this time, Hollywood didn't answer. Here's where things get truly surreal. Meghan and Harry's Netflix deal, once celebrated as a $100 million game-changer, had begun losing steam. After Harry and Meghan and Live to Lead, momentum dropped. Fast. Their Spotify deal was dead. Their documentary projects kept stalling. And now, the Archewell Australia tour, which was quietly being pitched to industry insiders as part Diana, part Michelle Obama, part Eat, Pray, Love, had zero confirmed production backing. That's when Meghan made the pivot. She reached for her Rolodex. Phone calls, DMs, back-channel pings. To who? Top Hollywood PR agencies, production companies, luxury brand liaisons, influential LA stylists, A-listers with social impact brands. The message was simple. Meghan is planning something big. Australia, 2026, it's about reclaiming space, telling a new story. We'd love to bring you in early. You'd think Hollywood would jump, right? Wrong. One exec who received the pitch described it like this. It sounded like a royal redemption tour meets wellness brand rollout meets image rehab. And no one was quite sure what to do with it. Translation? Too vague. Too risky. Too. Meghan. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just about industry strategy. It was about social standing. In Montecito, in West Hollywood, in Malibu, Meghan still holds considerable weight. But among the power brokers, the streamers, the fashion houses, the philanthropic influencers, her stock had dropped. And that drop was measurable. Meghan had reportedly hoped that tying in top-tier fashion brands and global women's initiatives to her Australia trip would create buzz. Archewell staffers reached out to several major fashion brands to partner on the tour. Not one said yes. Why? Because brands don't gamble with controversy, especially when the last few Meghan-related campaigns had faced significant backlash online. One luxury fashion house reportedly replied, "We admire the mission, but we're focused on different markets this year." Translation? Thanks, but no thanks. Then came the restaurant refusals. This is where things got personal. Meghan's team had quietly scouted high-end restaurants across Sydney and Melbourne. Not for public events, but for private moments. Think candlelit dinners. Photos of Meghan greeting chefs. Subtle branding. They reached out through PR channels, requesting privacy-friendly spaces, exclusive bookings, and media-free zones. Out of 11 restaurants contacted, only one responded positively. The rest either refused, dodged the request, or leaked it, quietly, to insiders. One hospitality manager reportedly said, "It's not the security. It's not even the requests. It's the vibe. We don't want the drama." The vibe. That's what it had come down to. Meghan, once the darling of Vogue, Vanity Fair, and Oprah's inner circle, was now seen as a PR risk. And in an image-obsessed town like Hollywood, that's lethal. But Meghan didn't give up, because there was still one more card to play. The Netflix angle. She believed that if she could bring Netflix on board, even loosely, it would legitimize the tour. Give it weight, prestige, media protection. So Archewell's executive team reached out to Netflix's content team, suggesting a new mini-doc series tied to the Australia trip. Working title, Reclaiming the Narrative. The pitch? Meghan visits Australia. She connects with women. She reflects on her past, her growth, her journey from actress to duchess to entrepreneur. She highlights Australia's unique cultural moments. There's fashion, storytelling, reflection, and transformation. Sounds good on paper, right? But here's what Netflix reportedly said. "We're not commissioning travelogues or brand-building documentaries at this time." Ouch. Sources inside Archewell say Meghan was stunned by the rejection. Not because Netflix said no, but because they didn't even try to soften it. No long meeting. No second call. Just a flat, "not now." And that's when the whispers started. Has Meghan lost Hollywood? Now pause for a second. Ask yourself this. How does someone who once headlined Vanity Fair's Hollywood issue, got married in a Windsor Castle fairy tale, and had a direct line to Oprah, suddenly become too risky to host at a restaurant? Is it media fatigue? Is it public distrust? Or is it the reality that, without a title or palace backing, Meghan's brand doesn't carry the same armor anymore? Because here's the brutal irony. Hollywood loves a comeback story, but it hates desperation. And Meghan's push to force this tour into existence, to package it as a cultural moment when no one had asked for one, looked desperate, at least to the people who matter. But the rejections weren't all private. One high-profile publicist, who had once worked with Meghan early in her post-royal transition, gave an anonymous quote to a major Hollywood trade site. "The Australia thing? It felt like she was trying to manufacture a legacy in real time." But legacies aren't booked through hotel chains and stylists. They're earned. Another entertainment insider put it more harshly. She's not royal. She's not acting. She's not producing. So what exactly is she? That quote went viral. Meghan saw it. And it hurt. Because behind the curated Instagram quotes and the charity PR campaigns, Meghan had believed she was building something real. A platform. A voice. A purpose. Now, even that was being questioned. And just when things seemed to hit rock bottom, they didn't. Because one more rejection was waiting. And it wasn't from a venue. It wasn't from a PR firm. It was from someone she trusted. Someone who knew her better than most. a friend, a mentor, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in months. And when that person reached out, not with encouragement, not with help, but with a warning, it changed the entire course of Meghan's plan. Because the next person on the line was Marcus Anderson. And what he told Meghan would make her question everything. What's worse than being rejected? Being laughed at for your demands. In Hollywood, power is measured in silence. Private jets arranged, floors reserved, chefs briefed. All quietly, all respectfully. But when that silence breaks, when your private requests go public, that's when reputations collapse. Not because of scandal, but because of mockery. And for Meghan Markle, the leaked Archewell Australia tour demands didn't just kill the momentum. They turned her into a punchline. It started with a document, a simple planning spreadsheet. One tab for travel, one tab for accommodations, one tab labeled non-negotiables. And that tab? That's what made its way to the outside world. It wasn't supposed to leak. It was part of an internal planning file created by a junior staffer who had worked briefly with Archewell Events on a contract basis. According to insiders, she was let go before the tour's fate was fully sealed. But she left with a copy. Not maliciously. Not even illegally. She just kept it, like most freelancers do. Until weeks later, frustrated with the way Archewell ghosted her final invoice, she shared it with a contact in the event industry. And from there, the contents exploded. Let's break it down. The non-negotiable section listed Meghan's expectations for her accommodations, event partners, transportation, and general logistics while in Australia. Some were standard for a public figure. Blackout curtains, vegan catering, no press during private family moments. Fine. But others? They weren't just extravagant. They were absurd. Here's what reportedly appeared on the list. Exclusive use of entire hotel floors, even if rooms remained unoccupied. Custom scented diffusers in every suite, designed to enhance emotional clarity. A certified energy practitioner available on-site for daily recalibration. Ban on all red flowers in any event space due to color energy implications. A zero-noise clause between 2 to 4 p.m. for Meghan's creative alignment window. All coffee served must be shade-grown, organic, and blessed by a local spiritual leader. No photographs of Meghan taken from the left side, even candidly. Staff dress codes for anyone in direct proximity. Neutral earth tones only. And that was just the beginning. The real backlash came from the venue requirements. According to the document, hotels must provide soundproof private entry points, preferably not through kitchens or garages. Bathrooms must be equipped with copper water vessels for healing hydration. Event spaces must undergo space-clearing rituals before her arrival. Meghan would require a 15-minute transition space between rooms, meaning at least 2 rooms always remained unoccupied on either side, wherever she went. Oh, and no overhead lighting. All venues were instructed to avoid direct overhead fluorescence, instead opting for candles or soft indirect glow settings. Even restaurants weren't spared. One section labeled Dining Protocol noted, all dishes must be taste tested by Archewell culinary team prior to service. No scallions. No dense starches, white potatoes, corn. Tables must have no more than 4 people seated at a time to preserve intimacy. Now let's pause. Do these demands sound insane? To some, yes. To others, they're just part of the modern celebrity playbook. But the problem wasn't the list. The problem was that the list got leaked. And not just to one person. Within 24 hours of the email being shared among 3 event planners, screenshots had landed in the inbox of an anonymous gossip blog in Melbourne. By the next day, a summarized version appeared online under the headline. Inside Meghan's bizarre Aussie demands, crystals, candles, and no red flowers. And the backlash? Instant. Twitter exploded. TikTok creators made parody skits acting out the creative alignment window. One viral post read, "So Meghan wants the hotel to be silent from 2 to 4 p.m. The same time every toddler is screaming in a pool downstairs." It got 2.4 million views. Another joked, "Imagine being the poor intern assigned to ban all red flowers in Australia." Even Australian morning shows jumped in. One host said, "This isn't a royal tour. It's Coachella with a side of crystal therapy." Meghan saw it all, and she was furious. According to someone close to the Archewell team, Meghan demanded an emergency Zoom call that same night. Not just with PR, with legal. She wanted to know if she could sue. Unfortunately, the staffer who leaked the list was no longer contracted. The document wasn't technically confidential, and the damage was already done. Worse, the media was just getting started. Because then came the second leak. A separate file labeled Preferred Media Guidelines surfaced. This wasn't part of the original list. It came from a different contractor who had helped draft Archewell's media outreach strategy for the tour. This file included phrases like, "Do not refer to Meghan as former royal. Use philanthropist and humanitarian. Avoid comparisons to Kate Middleton in headlines. Reinforce Archewell's independence from monarchy, but acknowledge global relevance." And a section titled Suggested Photo Captions that included, "Meghan Markle walks beside Indigenous elders, grounding herself in centuries of tradition. The Duchess of Sussex, in her most authentic chapter yet, once again leaked, once again mocked, and by now, even Meghan's supporters were struggling to defend her." Behind closed doors, Harry was reportedly devastated, not because he disagreed with the demands, but because he hadn't seen the list himself. Insiders claim Harry felt blindsided, that he had trusted Archewell to keep the tour simple and grounded. He had hoped to avoid headlines, not fuel them. The rift between Meghan's vision and Harry's instincts deepened. One former Archewell employee noted, "Harry's idea of impact is shaking hands with veterans. Meghan's is an editorial shoot in front of a rescued dolphin." The cracks were widening, and Meghan knew it, because while the public was laughing, the industry was closing in. Several major Australian charities pulled back from informal commitments. Tourism partners rescinded soft offers to support events. One Aboriginal elder, who had initially expressed interest in hosting Meghan for a land acknowledgement ceremony, issued a blunt statement. "We don't need outsiders choreographing our traditions. We've seen enough performative tours." The message was clear. The brand wasn't just rejected, it was ridiculed. And in the world of high-profile image building, that's fatal. Meghan's next move would determine everything. She could cancel the tour quietly and pivot, or she could fight back. And that's exactly what she chose. But not through statements, not through PR. She picked up the phone and called someone she hadn't spoken to in almost a year. A man who knew the game better than anyone. Someone who once helped build her brand from the shadows. Marcus Anderson. And what he revealed would send Meghan into a tailspin. Because the problem wasn't just the demands list. It was who was spreading them. And the name he gave her was someone Meghan never expected. They say silence can be louder than screaming. And inside the Montecito mansion, as the leaks spread, the headlines worsened, and Meghan's fury grew louder by the hour. Prince Harry's silence became deafening. No outbursts, no statements, no slamming doors, just long walks, longer stares. And, as one insider described it, a look in his eyes like he'd seen the future and didn't like what was coming. Because while Meghan fought to control the narrative, Harry was quietly unraveling. Not in public, but in private. In the one place cameras couldn't reach, his thoughts. And behind that silence was a slow, heartbreaking meltdown. Let's rewind. The day that demands list leaked, Harry was in London for an Invictus Games planning session. He was scheduled to attend a small veterans breakfast at a local charity center. Instead, he canceled. No explanation. No appearance. Just a one-line message sent to the coordinator. "Something's come up. I won't make it." Back in Montecito, Meghan had just hung up the phone with Marcus Anderson, the man who told her who leaked the internal document. The name? Still redacted to most insiders. But according to Marcus, it wasn't an outsider. It wasn't a royal mole. It wasn't even a media contact. It was someone within Archewell. Someone Meghan trusted. Someone Harry had personally vouched for. And that, according to multiple sources, is when everything changed. Meghan stormed into the Home Office. She confronted two staffers on the spot. One broke down crying. The other walked out, never to return. Harry, still in London, got a text from his head of security. "FYI, 2 staff gone. M is saying internal sabotage confirmed." His response? No reply. 3 hours passed. Then a second message. "You should probably call her. She's unraveling." Harry didn't call. Instead, he went to a private members club in Soho. Alone. Witnesses say he sat in the corner, staring at his phone, scrolling, probably reading the headlines, the tweets, the memes. He didn't order food, just 2 drinks. And then he left. No entourage, no friends, just one man, lost. But let's not forget, Harry was never built for this game. Meghan was. She understood the spotlight, the performance, the optics, the pace of public narratives. Harry? He was born into scrutiny, raised to accept it, but never trained to master it. In the past, when scandal hit, Harry had the institution. Now, he had nothing. No palace, no team, no brothers, no buffer. And with the Archewell Australia disaster spiraling beyond repair, he was beginning to feel the walls close in. Insiders say Harry had expressed doubts about the tour from the beginning. He didn't like the spectacle. He didn't like the scale. He didn't like how Meghan kept calling it my comeback. To Harry, it felt more like a show than a mission. But he went along with it. Because, as one confidant put it, Harry always wants Meghan to win, even if it means ignoring his own instincts. And that's exactly what he did, until it exploded in their faces. Back in Montecito, Meghan wasn't just furious at the leaker. She was furious at Harry. Why? Because when the Archewell CEO's slip-up went viral and the demand list became a meme, Harry stayed silent. He didn't defend her. He didn't post. He didn't reach out to his own contacts. He disappeared. One source close to Meghan said, she felt abandoned, not by the world, but by Harry. She needed him to stand beside her. And he vanished. But Harry hadn't vanished. He was retreating, not just from the media storm, but from Meghan herself. When he finally returned to Montecito 5 days later, things had changed. The energy was off. The staff looked scared. The phones were ringing less. Harry walked in, dropped his bag, and headed straight to the garden, his thinking place, as Meghan used to call it. She followed. The conversation that followed lasted 20 minutes. No one heard what was said, but the aftermath was nuclear. An hour later, Meghan canceled a planned Zoom interview with a women's wellness brand. She left the house for a drive. Alone, Harry stayed behind. And when staff returned that evening, they found him sitting in the living room, staring at the TV, which wasn't even turned on. This wasn't the Harry we saw in interviews. This wasn't the laughing, barefoot, chicken-feeding dad. This was a man watching the empire he helped build crack, slowly, publicly, and painfully. And deep down, he feared one thing more than the headlines. That he'd seen this before. With his mother. With his family. With himself. The media storm. The public turning. The feeling of being both everywhere and nowhere. And now, the woman he loved was caught in that same storm. Except this time, there was no one coming to help. One former royal staffer, still in touch with Harry, said it best. He knows how fast the tide turns. He's seen it his whole life. But watching Meghan go through it, while trying to keep Archewell afloat, is breaking him. And maybe that's why he started shutting down. Because Harry isn't wired for slow burn destruction. He's a man of action. When he left the royal family, it was swift. When he spoke out on Oprah, it was bold. But this was slow, ugly, messy, uncontrollable. And that's what broke him. In the days that followed, Harry canceled 2 appearances. He was scheduled to speak at a sustainability panel. He pulled out. He was supposed to meet with Archewell's educational partners. He postponed. He stopped replying to press. He stopped engaging with staff. He began avoiding meetings, even with Meghan. One Archewell employee described it like this. He was in the building, but not really there. Like a shadow. And while Meghan scrambled to save the optics, calling in favors, reshuffling schedules, drafting new statements, Harry watched from the sidelines. Unable, unwilling, unsure. Until one night, around 11 p.m., he walked into Meghan's office and said 6 words that chilled her. I think we should cancel Australia. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. And in that moment, Meghan knew. This wasn't about logistics anymore. This was about him. He was done. He couldn't fight another PR war. He didn't have the strength or the will to face a continent that no longer wanted them. To face headlines that mocked their marriage, their mission, their brand. To face himself. So when Meghan looked into Harry's eyes and saw the pain, she did something no one expected. She nodded and said, then we cancel it. But the next morning, she did something very different. She called someone Harry hadn't spoken to since the royal split. A voice from the other side of the Atlantic. A voice Harry once trusted. A voice Meghan now needed. not for comfort, but for information. Because if Harry was breaking down, if Australia was out, if Archewell was crumbling, she needed a new plan, and the person she called wasn't who anyone expected. Because Meghan wasn't done yet, and her next move would drag another royal into the storm. Every empire has its bunker. For Meghan Markle, that bunker wasn't made of concrete or steel. It was glass walls, curated eucalyptus candles, and a vision board titled Global Transformation. But make no mistake, it was a war room. Because when everything began to fall apart, the leaks, the rejections, the public humiliation, Meghan did what she had always done best. She took control, and she called everyone in. The official meeting invite was sent at 6:48 a.m. Subject line: urgent. Archewell Ops reset mandatory attendance. No agenda, no friendly emojis, no explanations. Staff knew what that meant. Brace for battle. By 10 a.m., 12 core Archewell team members, including PR leads, legal counsel, event coordinators, social media managers, and Meghan's inner circle, were seated around the long glass table inside the Montecito estate. Phones silenced, laptops open, eyes forward. Then Meghan walked in, and for a moment, no one said a word. Her face was calm, too calm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply looked at each of them and said, "We are not victims. We are not failures. We are not quitting. But we are changing everything, starting now." That's when the real meeting began. Over the next 4 hours, Archewell went into full-blown crisis mode. Phase 1. Identify the breach. First, Meghan wanted names. Who leaked the demands list? Who circulated the CEO's audio? Who forwarded internal media strategy docs? Legal counsel gave a presentation on internal communication vulnerabilities. One junior team member confessed to accidentally sharing an itinerary with a freelance consultant who no longer worked with Archewell. That consultant was later revealed to be the source of at least one leak. Immediate action? His access was revoked. All former contractors were scrubbed from cloud platforms. NDAs were reissued. But Meghan wasn't satisfied. "This isn't about one leak," she said. "It's about narrative control. And right now, we have none." Phase 2. Retake the narrative. Meghan turned to her PR lead. She wanted to know, could the demands list be contextualized? Could a sympathetic journalist be pitched an exclusive? Could Archewell spin this into a conversation about misogyny and media manipulation? The PR team suggested a soft reset, an open letter, a new charity initiative, something to pivot public attention. Meghan rejected it. "This isn't a time for gentle. This is a time for strategy." She proposed something else. A video, not a formal address, not a press conference. A day-in-the-life style documentary, raw, intimate, powerful. Show Meghan as a working mother, a thoughtful leader, a misunderstood advocate. Use Australia as a footnote, not the headline. Netflix? Out. YouTube and Instagram? In. The team nodded. But one social media manager raised a concern. "If we film that now, people might see it as damage control." Meghan's reply? "Of course it's damage control, but we're going to make it look like evolution." Phase 3. Redefine the tour. That's when the conversation took an unexpected turn. Because Meghan didn't want to cancel Australia anymore. She wanted to replace it. Not geographically, strategically. "Australia doesn't define us," she said. "We define us. If they won't host us, someone else will." The new idea? A global Archewell listening tour. Multiple countries. Shorter stops. Grassroots focused. Intimate. Controlled. Less red carpet, more community circles. Less demand, more humility. Less luxury, more authenticity. Or at least, the illusion of it. Locations floated included. Kenya, women's education. Chile, climate innovation. India, maternal health. Greece, refugee advocacy. All places where the Sussex brand might still resonate, or at the very least, draw fewer headlines. The team scrambled to map logistics. Meghan wanted plans drafted within a week. But beneath the surface, no one could ignore the elephant in the room. Harry. Because throughout the entire 4-hour meeting, he said nothing. He sat near the window. He listened. He sipped water. But he didn't contribute. And for those who knew him well, that silence wasn't passive. It was deliberate. It was his protest. After the meeting ended, the team dispersed. Meghan retreated to her private office with her comms director. Two staffers cried in the guest house. Harry? He walked into the garden. Alone. Again. But later that night, he did something unexpected. He called Tyler Perry. Perry had been more than just a friend during Meghan and Harry's post-royal transition. He gave them a home when they left the UK. He gave them cover when the palace withdrew protection. He gave them space. And Harry, in this moment of internal chaos, needed that space again. According to a source familiar with the call, Harry told Tyler, "I don't think I'm built for this kind of war." Tyler's reply? Then stop fighting. Let her handle it. But Harry wasn't sure that was enough. Because this wasn't just Meghan's battle. This was his name too. And the thought of continuing a global tour while his wife was mocked and his silence seen as weakness, it haunted him. Back in Montecito, Meghan drafted a statement. Not for the press, for the Archewell team. An internal message, thanking them for their resilience, their loyalty, and their belief in a vision that extends beyond headlines. She signed it. Meghan always. But her real plan was just beginning. Because if Australia had slammed its doors shut, she would find a way to kick open others. And the next one was about to involve government officials. Because Meghan had one last idea left. Something big, something bold. And it started with a phone call to the Prime Minister's office of New Zealand. What do you do when the red carpet vanishes? You look for the back door. And Meghan Markle? She found one. Not in Australia. Not in Montecito. Not in Hollywood. But 2,000 miles across the Tasman Sea. In a country that once adored her. A country that had remained eerily silent throughout the Sussex scandal fallout. New Zealand. At first, the idea was just a name on a whiteboard. Then it became a whisper. Then a call. And before anyone realized what was happening, Meghan had shifted the entire Archewell machine to pursue something far more delicate and far more dangerous. A political endorsement from a nation-state. Let's go back. The Montecito War Room had already been cleared. Plans were being redrawn. Harry was emotionally distant. Australia was off the table. But Meghan? She wasn't just licking her wounds. She was plotting. Because the headlines had gotten personal, the rejection had become public, and the Archewell brand was bleeding. So if Australia was lost, why not turn to its quieter cousin? After all, Meghan had history in New Zealand. During the 2018 royal tour, she had visited Wellington, Auckland, Rotorua. She walked through rain-soaked crowds with Harry, clutching her baby bump, smiling, relatable, real. She was praised, adored, even embraced. And, unlike Australia, New Zealand had never outright rejected her. Yet. So she made the call. It wasn't to the Prime Minister directly. It was to a well-connected NGO leader with ties to the government, someone Archewell had been in touch with over maternal health programs. The ask? Would the Prime Minister's office be open to an informal conversation about Meghan's visit? Just preliminary. Nothing official. She wants to support local causes. Discreetly. The NGO contact was polite. Cautious. They said they'd inquire. Within 48 hours, Meghan had her answer. And it wasn't what she expected. The message from the Prime Minister's team was simple. Too simple. We appreciate the interest. At this time, we're not looking to pursue any international visits or collaborations that require government resources. All the best. No name. No counteroffer. No soft yes. Just no. Diplomatic. Sterile. Dead. And for Meghan, it was infuriating. Not because they said no, but because it mirrored the same pattern she'd seen in Australia. Doors quietly closing. No drama. No confrontation. Just quiet rejection. The kind that makes your relevance feel like it's slipping away. Meghan's team tried to spin it. One staffer said, "It's budget season. No one's committing to anything right now." Another said, "Let's circle back after elections." But Meghan wasn't buying it. Because behind the scenes, she knew something else was going on. She had sources. And one of them, a journalist who'd worked in New Zealand media for years, sent her a voice note that chilled her. Off the record, there was concern. Not about logistics. About optics. They don't want to be seen backing controversy right now. Optics. That word again. The silent killer. Here's where it gets complicated. Meghan's team believed that if she could land even one government-backed visit, a school, a summit, a forum, it would re-legitimize Archewell. She didn't need the whole country. Just a headline. Meghan returns to Commonwealth to champion women. But every door she knocked on closed. Softly, silently, strategically, because the political class in the South Pacific had seen what happened to those who got too close. The backlash, the tabloid frenzy, the brand wars. And no prime minister, no minister for tourism, no cultural liaison wanted to inherit the chaos. Even if they liked her, even if they admired her, even if they agreed with her values, they just didn't want to be involved. That's when Meghan snapped. She called a team meeting, 9 p.m., Friday night. Most of the staff had already left for the weekend, but Meghan had been stewing for hours. She walked into the conference room, threw her phone on the table, and said, "They're afraid of me. That's it. Not the cause. Not the tour. Me." Silence. Then she pointed at the whiteboard, where New Zealand 2026 had been circled in green marker. "Erase it." No one moved, so she did it herself. She picked up the eraser, walked to the board, and wiped it away. One staffer later said, "It was symbolic. That circle was her hope, and she erased it herself. That's when we knew she was going nuclear." Because Meghan wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to knock on any more government doors. She was going to build her own stage, with her own partners, her own cameras, her own message, and no middlemen. But first, she needed to understand why she was being rejected so systematically. So she called someone unexpected, a former political strategist, one who had worked with Harry's team back in the UK during his military foundation years. Someone who knew how countries made these decisions. What he told her wasn't about her. Not really. It was about him. "Harry," the strategist explained, "you're not being rejected as Meghan. You're being rejected as Meghan and Harry. Because governments see you as a pair. And while Meghan is unpredictable, Harry is complicated. He's insulted half the Commonwealth. He's criticized colonialism, tradition, and the very structure these countries are still tangled up in. They can't separate your cause from his commentary, and they don't want to touch it." That hit hard. Meghan reportedly didn't speak for a full minute after hearing that. Then she asked, "So what if I go without him?" Another pause. The strategist didn't say yes or no. He just said, "It would be easier." That night, Meghan stayed up past 2 a.m., alone in her office. Laptop open, tea cold, lights dim. She wasn't crying. She was thinking. Because for the first time in a long time, she realized something gut-wrenching. Harry wasn't her shield anymore. He wasn't her royal pass. He wasn't her validation. He wasn't her leverage. In some rooms, he was now her liability. And the only way forward might be without him. Not personally, not emotionally, but professionally. The next morning, she did something bold. She emailed her legal team and asked them to review the language of all Archewell tour proposals, PR materials, and press kits. Specifically, she wanted to know, how easily can I pivot this narrative to be centered solely on my voice? Translation: if Harry steps back, will the world still watch? And more importantly, will they listen? By Monday morning, Archewell had a new directive. A solo initiative, unnamed, unbranded, was to be developed. Smaller, sharper, personal, women's circles, mental health, motherhood, themes Meghan could own alone. Harry would still support from the sidelines, but he wouldn't be front and center. And in that shift, a new Meghan was emerging, one more calculated, more determined, less compromised. And her next move wouldn't involve a prime minister. It would involve a king. Because just when Meghan thought governments were backing away, Prince William made a surprise visit, and his timing couldn't have been more brutal. How does an entire tour collapse in a single sentence? It wasn't leaked video. It wasn't a tabloid ambush. It wasn't even Meghan or Harry who broke it. It was a phone call, a quiet, 8-minute call. And by the end of it, one offhand comment from the Archewell CEO would do what no royal feud, no angry press headline, and no palace insider had managed to do. He confirmed it. He confirmed what Meghan had spent months denying, even to herself. The tour was off, scrapped, abandoned, not postponed, canceled. And the words that sealed the deal? We couldn't get the support we needed. It just didn't materialize. Let's rewind. The call was meant to be private. It was a routine check-in between Archewell's lead logistics consultant and a former Australian tour coordinator. The two had worked together loosely during the 2018 Royal Tour, and this was a follow-up to see if there was any last chance of securing venues or interest. On the line, Archewell's chief executive officer, A man handpicked by Meghan and Harry to professionalize their global operations, known for his calm demeanor and decades of nonprofit experience. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't reckless. But that day, he got too comfortable. The Australian contact had just returned from holiday and asked point-blank, "So where are things at with the tour? I heard it's being pushed." There was a pause, and then the words came.